Chapter 4. My Mother. My mother's childhood was so sweet, I understand. She lived across from her grandfather and grandmother Dixon, and oh, how they did love her. She looks back and remembers, it was love always. I wasn't pampered. It just seemed that what they said, I believed. Often her folks would be gone and would leave her at Grandpa and Grandma Dixon's. When she began to be sleepy, she would go up to her grandfather and say, "Pap, this pillow is getting heavy." Then he would get up, fix the pillow on the round of the rocker, and rock her to sleep. They lived what they preached, Mother has told me. Grandpa was an old Civil War veteran, leaving his family to go help free the precious slaves. The only things Grandmother had when he went to war were her cows, her chickens, and what she could raise. The only money she had she earned by knitting socks or stockings for other people. Her folks, the Butlers, came through as pioneers from Virginia in an old ox cart. Grandmother was about 3 years old when they arrived here in Indiana. They were truly godly people. Loren O. Dixon, my mother's father, grew up in his father's blacksmith and wood shop. He was a skilled mechanic and could make almost anything in iron or wood, but everything had to be just right. He would work on one job all day to make sure it was absolutely correct, even if he made only 50 cents on it. He was not one to put work out merely to make money, but a man to do the job accurately and precisely. I remember waking early in the mornings to the sound of my grandfather Dixon pounding on his anvil. I would ask my mother if I could go down and watch him work, and sometimes she would let me go. I observed him as he put the steel into the intense heat of the coals. If he left the iron in long enough, and if it got red enough, he could do something with it. I would see him take the iron or the steel from the forge, lay it over the anvil, then begin to pound it and shape it. Whatever shape was needed from that metal, round or square, he could form it on the anvil. God is likewise wanting to fashion our lives into unique patterns of His loveliness. But first, He must find us surrendered to the fire of His purpose. There is much refining to be done in us, and as in my grandfather's forge, it requires the fire. Sometimes it is the fire of His love as we wait in secret. Often it is the fire of affliction. Occasionally it is the fire of persecution. But God places us in the fire that we might be made malleable to His higher purposes. I heard a pastor once tell a story of a godly blacksmith who was afflicted much of the time. People would ask him, "Why are you so afflicted? Why are you so tried? If God loves you, and you love God so much, why are you so tested?" And he replied, "When I reach in with my tongs and take out that red-hot steel, I can tell when I put it across the anvil and strike it the first time whether it is going to take temper and bend. If it won't take temper, I scrap it. God is trying to temper me so that I will bend easily to His purpose and won't end up on the scrap heap." Most people will not take the temper. They won't accept the bending. They refuse to be smitten. Few are willing to bend from self-desires to the purpose of God. Many persons who begin with Jesus at conversion are unwilling to press on into obedience that they might be shaped according to His will. They get out of the hand of God by going their own way, making their own plans, and arranging their own lives. Few throughout the centuries have learned the mystery of God's divine hand molding and shaping the lives of His beloved ones. Oh, how God wants to take out of us the many things which hinder Him. There is so much in a man when he thinks he can still do something in himself. God has revealed to me that we can do nothing but fail. Therefore, He must refine out of us many wrong attitudes and considerable self-reliance before we begin to discover that we are only full of failure. Until we are willing to be nothing, God can shape us very little, if any. Grandfather Dixon died in 1941 when I was 25. I cannot reminisce long about him without weeping, for he was a man tall in nobility. He was a man of great meekness. Most persons, unless they have been thoroughly cleansed by the Spirit, can sometimes become jealous or angry and rage when they don't get their way. But my grandfather underwent great suffering and passed through situations which would break your heart if I would share them. Yet he did not complain or murmur. As a boy, I can remember hauling gravel, shucking corn, and building fence with him while on the farm. Not once did he become angry with me or get after me. He was one of those rare men who was willing to go the second mile. I can recall that after his hip had been crushed, the doctors didn't know until too late how seriously he had been hurt. The hip joint healed imperfectly and afterwards pained him severely at almost every step. Yet, when Joyce Lee, our first daughter, was born, and my wife was recuperating in her parents' home, Grandfather Dixon came to Taylor University to stay with me and assist me. We lived in a little apartment upstairs, and he climbed those steps through much pain in that injured hip, with very little said about it. You see, my weeping is because of pleasant memories of a man very rare in the earth. I have seldom seen his like in all of my travels. My father said of Loren O. Dixon and his brother Tom, because of the gracious spirit in their lives, that they stood head and shoulders above other men in the community. He has told me many times, I wish I had been more understanding of my father-in-law. He was a bigger, greater man than I was able to esteem at that time. It was his sister, Aunt Lib, who was such a gracious, gentle, compassionate woman. She and her husband, Uncle Billy, loved me very much from the time I was first born. I recall Uncle Billy putting on a record of an old hymn, How Tedious and Tasteless the Hours. The memory of this song lingers in my heart over the years. How tedious and tasteless the hours when Jesus no longer I see. Sweet prospects, sweet birds, and sweet flowers have all lost their sweetness to me. The midsummer sun shines but dim. The fields strive in vain to look gay. But when I am happy in him, December's as pleasant as May. He would sit in the old chair as this precious hymn would play, and tears would course from his kind eyes over his round cheeks and drop into his lap. As I mentioned earlier, my mother's mother, Elizabeth Dixon, was an equally unique and gifted individual. Her parents came from near Cincinnati, Ohio. Her father's parents, the Clarks, were religious people. My great-grandfather Clark, a genuine and humble person, did daily work on the farm. Great-grandmother Clark was an orphan girl. Her mother died when she was a baby, so she was passed from one home to another until my great-grandfather married her. She was a stepmother to his 6 children. Elizabeth often felt that Grandfather Clark's 6 children loved Grandmother Clark as much as the children of their own marriage. Great tenderness was in her life. Elizabeth Clark Dixon was gifted in caring for the sick. She not only cared for her own family, she was called into different homes around the community to help in time of sickness. In fact, families would often ask for Lizzie before they would call a doctor, so confident were they of her skills. She just seemed to know what to do, it was said of her. She was with many women when they gave birth to their children. I used to wonder where she had gone when I got up in the morning, Mother tells me. I would get up and find her gone, only to discover a little later that a tiny baby had come to live at so-and-so's house. Lizzie had the ability to go into a home and simply take over all the responsibilities. It didn't seem to upset her. Years later, when my father was her son-in-law, he often said, "If Grandma was there, everything was all right. I didn't have any worries when she was present. She was just like my own mother." Elizabeth was a woman of faith, of integrity, of service, a woman of sharing. Her last activity before her mortal sickness was, appropriately, in service of others. While sweeping the church on a Wednesday evening in preparation for worship, she unexpectedly had a severe gallbladder attack. Thursday they took her to the hospital, but at first her fever was much too high for surgery. When they were finally able to operate, there was little that the physicians could do, for her gallbladder had burst. The pain was intense, but she never complained. When the doctor would come to inquire of her condition, she would say, "You have other patients to see about. Don't worry about me." The doctors and nurses in that hospital concurred that she dwelt in the areas of outstanding faith and nobility. One of the leading surgeons of that time remarked that he had never seen anyone like my grandmother Dixon, for she was always wanting him to help somebody else rather than to attend to her. When Elizabeth was dying, my mother was beside her, holding her hand. Grandmother had been so weak she could hardly move her arms. But suddenly she raised her arms and said, "Oh, child, child, there is Jesus." Amazed, my mother asked, "Mother, do you see Jesus?" "Oh, yes," she answered, "just as plain as I see you. He is beautiful. Look, right up there. Jesus is here. Oh, there is a light in the valley of death. I see Jesus, child. He is wonderful. I can see now why all earthly things don't mean anything," she told my mother. "I see now why you didn't want to work in all those organizations." For my mother had had an unusual experience with God some time before this, and had felt led to withdraw from several organizations of men. "Oh, I can see Jesus. He is marvelous." While my grandmother was dying, she was privileged to see Jesus. When you can see Jesus, all these earthly things don't mean a snap of the fingers. The only thing that is going to matter is whether Jesus Christ has been first in your life. And he will mean so much more to you at death than I can tell you now. And yet, as I say these words, even as I am speaking them, I know that very few will actually hear me. When I am in the pulpit and humbly striving to declare the whole counsel of God with all my might, somehow I have the realization that scarcely any of the people can hear what I am telling them. I will be preaching the best I know, as faithfully as I can, and while I am preaching, I can tell that the demon powers are stealing the gospel truths right out of the people's minds. When the sermon or exhortation is ended, instead of being contrite in their hearts, so often the congregation talks about farms, cars, and ball games. Instead of crying out in brokenness, "Oh Lord, I am so needy," they chatter about home, children, the job, and any other thing but the will of God and the love of Jesus. You see, beloved, my heart is broken in church after church all across this country. The people are precious in every church. They are kind and generous. They would do anything to help. But very few are hearing the true Christian message of self-denial, of the cross, of trust and obedience, down deep in their heart. There might be 1, 2, or 3 in an entire congregation who are getting the message of true Christianity inside the heart. If dear ones were getting the message, they would be heartbroken. They would be weeping and crying. This is a fact. My heart weeps when I see how lost the world is and how far the church is from God's will. Jesus said, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted." But the professed church has this in reverse. After a man of God preaches, there is often laughter, light conversation, and joking among ourselves instead of repentant tears. It seems that some are saying, "Blessed is the man who has a hi-ho time and is able to get the boys to laugh." Oh, my friends, Jesus cried out to his age, and almost no one among the church leaders heard him. Even the handful of his closest followers, who observed mighty miracles day after day, fell asleep when it came to the hour when Jesus most needed them. And Jesus witnesses to me that the professed church today is spiritually 3 times more asleep than the apostles were in the Garden of Gethsemane. Think of that. In about all churches today, we are 3 times more asleep than the apostles were when Jesus needed them most. I am so thankful that my grandmother had a heart awake to the life of Christ so that she could see Jesus as she was leaving this earth. Praise the Lord.